In the small, quiet village of Thikargan nestled amidst the rolling hills of northern India, life moved slowly, unbothered by the hustle and bustle of the cities. It was a place where time seemed to stand still, where traditions were held close, and where stories passed down through generations still held power. Among the many stories whispered in hushed tones was the tale of Kamla, a name that struck fear in the hearts of those who knew of her. Kamla was once a vibrant young woman, known for her beauty and kindness. She lived with her parents in an old, weathered house at the edge of the village, near the dense forest that marked the boundary between the known and the unknown. But her story took a tragic turn one fateful night many years ago, a night that the villagers would never forget. The story goes that Kamla had fallen in love with a young man named Radin, who came from a neighboring village. Their love was pure, but it was also forbidden, for Radin was of a different caste. Despite the warnings and threats from their families, the two lovers planned to elope, hoping to start a new life far away from the constraints of society. On the night of their escape, Kamla waited for Radin by the old banyan tree at the edge of the forest, as they had planned. But Radin never came. Instead, a group of men from Kamla's own village, sent by her father to stop her from dishonoring the family, found her. In a fit of rage and madness, they took her life beneath the branches of the ancient tree. Her body was buried in an unmarked grave deep in the forest, and the villagers were sworn to secrecy. But Kamla's spirit did not rest. Soon after, strange things began to happen in Thikargan. The once peaceful village became a place of fear. The wind that blew through the forest carried whispers of sorrow, and those who ventured too close to the banyan tree claimed to hear the mournful cries of a woman. Livestock went missing, crops withered, and an eerie feeling settled over the village like a dark cloud. It was said that Kamla's spirit had returned, seeking revenge on those who wronged her. For years, the villagers avoided the area near the banyan tree, and the story of Kamla became a cautionary tale told to children to keep them from wandering into the forest. The old house where Kamla had lived with her parents was abandoned, left to decay as a reminder of the tragedy that had taken place, but time has a way of burying even the deepest fears. As the years passed, the memory of Kamla faded, and the new generation of villagers grew less afraid of the old stories. The village expanded, and the land near the forest was cleared for new homes. It was during this time of change that Rajiv and his family moved to Thikargan. Rajiv, a city-bred man, had recently retired from his job in the city and sought the peace and tranquility of village life. He had heard of the cheap land available in Thikargan and decided to buy the old house near the forest, thinking it a perfect place to spend his retirement years. Rajiv's wife, Meena, and their teenage daughter, Priya, were less enthusiastic about the move, but they had little choice. They arrived at the old house on a warm summer day, their car kicking up dust as it rolled to a stop in front of the dilapidated building. The house was in worse condition than Rajiv had imagined, with broken windows, crumbling walls, and an overgrown garden. But Rajiv was determined to make it their new home. "This place has potential," Rajiv said, trying to sound optimistic as he unlocked the front door. "With a little work, it will be as good as new." Priya looked up at the house, her eyes wide with unease. "It feels creepy," she said, shivering despite the heat. "Nonsense," Rajiv replied, brushing off her concerns. "It's just old. Once we clean it up, it will be fine." But as they stepped inside, the air grew heavy with a sense of foreboding. The interior of the house was dark and musty, with the smell of decay hanging in the air. The floorboards creaked beneath their feet, and the walls seemed to close in on them. Meena looked around uneasily, clutching her daughter's hand. "I don't like this place, Rajiv," she whispered. "It feels wrong." Rajiv sighed. "You're just not used to it yet. Give it some time." But as they began to settle into their new home, strange things started to happen. At first, it was just small, inexplicable occurrences, a sudden chill in the air, the sound of footsteps in the empty hallways, the feeling of being watched. But as the days passed, the incidents grew more frequent and more terrifying. One night, Priya woke up to the sound of someone sobbing outside her window. She sat up in bed, her heart pounding, and listened. The sobbing was soft at first, almost inaudible, but it grew louder with each passing second until it filled the room. Priya was paralyzed with fear. She didn't dare to move or call out to her parents. Instead, she lay still, clutching her blanket, praying for the sound to stop, but it didn't. The sobbing continued throughout the night, fading away only as the first light of dawn crept into the room. When Priya finally mustered the courage to look outside, she saw nothing but the empty garden, the trees swaying gently in the morning breeze. Priya told her parents about the sobbing, but they dismissed it as a bad dream. But Priya knew what she had heard. The sound of that sorrowful crying haunted her during the day and kept her awake at night. Chapter 2, The Unseen Presence. As the days went on, the presence in the house became more apparent. Meena, too, began to notice things that were out of place, doors that opened on their own, lights that flickered without reason, and the unsettling feeling of being watched whenever she was alone. Rajiv, however, remained skeptical, insisting that the house was just old and in need of repairs. One evening, as Meena was preparing dinner, she heard a soft whisper in her ear. It was so close that she could feel the breath on her skin. She spun around, but no one was there. The kitchen was empty, save for the old wooden table and the faint smell of cooking spices. Meena's heart raced as she clutched the edge of the countertop, her hands trembling. "Rajiv," she called out, but there was no response. She was alone in the kitchen, but she could still feel the presence of someone, or something, nearby. She quickly finished preparing the meal and called her family to the dining table, trying to shake off the fear that had gripped her. During dinner, the atmosphere was tense. Priya poked at her food, her eyes darting around the room as if expecting something to jump out of the shadows. Meena remained silent, her mind replaying the events in the kitchen. Rajiv, oblivious to the unease around him, ate his meal with gusto, talking about the renovations he planned for the house. "Once we get the place fixed up, it'll be much better," Rajiv said, his voice cheerful. "I'll hire some workers to take care of the repairs, and we can even start a small garden in the back." But neither Meena nor Priya shared his enthusiasm. They were too preoccupied with the growing sense of dread that seemed to permeate every corner of the house. That night, after they had all gone to bed, the house fell into an eerie silence. The wind outside had died down, and the only sound was the ticking of the old clock in the hallway. Priya lay in her bed, staring at the ceiling, unable to sleep. She couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong with the house. As she lay there, she heard the soft creak of a door opening. Her heart skipped a beat as she listened intently, trying to pinpoint the source of the sound. It was coming from down the hall, near her parents' room. Priya sat up and strained her ears. The creaking was followed by the sound of footsteps, slow, deliberate, and heading toward her room. Priya's breath caught in her throat as the footsteps grew closer. She wanted to scream, to run to her parents' room, but her body wouldn't move. She was frozen in place, her heart pounding in her chest. The footsteps stopped just outside her door. For a moment, there was only silence. Then, the door handle turned slowly, and the door creaked open. Priya stared in horror as the door swung wide, revealing the dark hallway beyond, but there was no one there. Priya's fear turned to confusion. She waited, expecting something to happen, but nothing did. The hallway remained empty, the darkness undisturbed. Slowly, she got out of bed and approached the door, her legs shaking. She peered into the hallway, her heart in her throat. The corridor was empty, the only light coming from the faint glow of the moon through the windows. Priya took a step forward, then another, her bare feet making no sound on the wooden floor. As she reached the top of the stairs, she heard it again, the soft sound of sobbing. It was coming from downstairs, from the direction of the old living room.